The autumn sun was setting over South Chicago as Marcus Thompson walked home from basketball practice, his worn-out night backpack hanging from one shoulder. At 16, he wasn't like most teenagers who kept their heads down, lost in their phones. His mother, Lisa Thompson, had taught him better than that. "Keep your eyes up and your mind sharp," she would always say. "You never know when someone might need help." Marcus lived those words every day, just like he lived everything else his mother taught him. As a single parent working 2 jobs, morning shifts at the local hospital as a nurse's aide and evening work at a nearby diner, Lisa had raised Marcus with both love and strict principles. Their small 2-bedroom apartment wasn't much, but Lisa had made it a home. The walls were covered with Marcus's academic certificates, sports trophies, and his proudly displayed Boy Scout achievements. Though money was tight, Lisa had never let that stop her from pushing Marcus toward his dreams. That Thursday afternoon seemed like any other. Marcus had stayed late at school, practicing free throws in the gym. Basketball wasn't just a hobby for him, it was his ticket to a better future. With his good grades and growing reputation as the team's point guard, he hoped for a sports scholarship to help ease his mother's burden. As he walked past Al's convenience store, where he often stopped for after-school snacks, Marcus felt the cool October breeze on his face. He was tired from practice but satisfied. Coach Williams had praised his improved defensive moves, and he couldn't wait to tell his mom about it when she got home from her evening shift. Marcus checked his watch. 5:45 p.m. He had enough time to get home, shower, heat up the casserole his mom had left in the fridge, and finish his chemistry homework. Science had always been his favorite subject, especially biology. Sometimes, when his mother worked late nights, he would stay up reading medical books from the library. The human body fascinated him, how everything worked together like a perfect machine. The streets were relatively quiet for this time of day. A few kids played basketball in the court across the street, their laughter echoing off the brick buildings. Mrs. Rodriguez was watering the small flower garden she maintained outside her building, the only splash of color in their otherwise gray neighborhood. She waved at Marcus, and he waved back, just as he did every day. "How's your mama, Marcus?" she called out. "She's doing good, Mrs. Rodriguez," he replied with a smile. "Still working hard as always. Tell her I have some fresh empanadas for her when she gets home." Marcus nodded, grateful for neighbors like Mrs. Rodriguez who looked out for them. In their community, people took care of each other. They had to. His mother always said that's what made their neighborhood special, not what they had, but how they shared it. As he approached the convenience store, Marcus adjusted his backpack and thought about the weekend ahead. He had a big game on Saturday, and his mother had promised to take her first day off in months to watch him play. The thought made him smile. Even though she was always tired from work, she never missed his important games. That's when he noticed the elderly man on the sidewalk. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual, just another person going about their day. The man was well dressed in a gray suit that had seen better days, his white hair neatly combed despite the wind. He was carrying a small paper bag from the pharmacy next door. But something wasn't right. Marcus noticed the man's unsteady gait, the way he kept reaching out to steady himself against the building wall. Years of watching his mother care for others had taught Marcus to recognize when someone was in distress. The man's face showed signs of discomfort, and his breathing seemed labored. In that moment, Marcus forgot about his tired muscles, his homework, and the hot dinner waiting at home. His mother's words echoed in his mind. "Keep your eyes up and your mind sharp." Without knowing it, Marcus was about to step into a situation that would change not only his life, but the lives of many others. Little did he know that this ordinary Thursday afternoon was about to become anything but ordinary. Marcus's instincts kicked in as he watched the elderly man sway dangerously on his feet. Without thinking twice, he sprinted forward, covering the 20 feet between them in seconds. His basketball training proved useful as he moved quickly but steadily, ready to catch someone much heavier than a ball. "Sir, are you okay?" Marcus called out, reaching the man just as his knees began to buckle. The elderly man, who Marcus would later know as Mr. Harold Bennett, tried to speak but could only manage a weak gasp. His paper pharmacy bag fell to the ground, pills spilling across the sidewalk. Marcus caught him before he could fall, carefully helping him sit down with his back against the convenience store wall. What Marcus saw scared him. Mr. Bennett's face had turned an unhealthy gray color, and he was clutching his chest with his right hand. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool weather, and his breathing came in short, painful gasps. Marcus remembered his Boy Scout first aid training. These were classic signs of a heart attack. "Someone call 911. Marcus shouted, looking around. A few people had stopped to stare, but no one moved to help. Marcus didn't waste any more time waiting for others to act. He pulled out his old iPhone, the one with the cracked screen his mother couldn't afford to replace, and dialed 911 himself. The operator's voice came through clearly. 911, what's your emergency? I think a man is having a heart attack, Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady like his mother did during emergencies at the hospital. We're outside Al's convenience store on East 47th Street. Please hurry. While talking to the operator, Marcus loosened Mr. Bennett's tie and collar, remembering his first aid training. The operator asked him to check if the man was still conscious and breathing. Mr. Bennett's eyes were open, but filled with fear. Stay with me, sir, Marcus said firmly but gently. Help is coming. Can you tell me your name? Harold. Bennett. The man managed to whisper between labored breaths. My heart. Mr. Bennett, I'm Marcus. The ambulance is on its way. Just try to stay calm and breathe with me. Okay. Marcus demonstrated slow, deep breaths, encouraging Mr. Bennett to follow along. He remembered how his mother once told him that staying calm was the best way to help someone in crisis. Inside, Marcus's heart was racing, but he kept his exterior composed. The convenience store owner, Mr. Patel, came running out with a chair and a bottle of water. I called his daughter, he said, showing Marcus a business card he had found in Mr. Bennett's wallet. She's on her way to the hospital. Marcus noticed Mr. Bennett's eyes starting to close. The 911 operator was still on the line, asking about his condition. That's when Marcus remembered something crucial. He had seen an AED machine inside the store during his many visits. His Boy Scout troop had practiced using one just last month. Mr. Patel, Marcus called out, his voice urgent but controlled. Don't you have a defibrillator inside, the red box near the counter? Mr. Patel's eyes widened with recognition, and he rushed back inside. Moments later, he returned with the AED device. Marcus had never used one in a real emergency, but he remembered the steps clearly. The 911 operator helped guide him through the process while they waited for the ambulance. Marcus attached the pads to Mr. Bennett's chest as instructed, his hands steady despite the pressure. The machine analyzed Mr. Bennett's heart rhythm, but didn't advise a shock. Still, having it ready brought comfort to everyone present. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. Mr. Bennett had remained conscious, though barely. His breathing was still labored, but the fear in his eyes had lessened somewhat as Marcus kept talking to him, keeping him focused and awake. The ambulance is almost here, Mr. Bennett, Marcus assured him. Just a few more seconds. You're doing great. As the paramedics pulled up, their red and white lights flashing against the darkening sky, Marcus felt a mixture of relief and worry. He had done everything he could, but would it be enough? He watched as the emergency medical team took over, efficiently transferring Mr. Bennett onto a stretcher. Before they loaded him into the ambulance, Mr. Bennett reached out weakly and grabbed Marcus's hand. No words were spoken, but the gesture said everything. Marcus stood on the sidewalk, watching as the ambulance pulled away, its sirens piercing the evening air. He didn't know it yet, but this moment of crisis would set in motion events that would change his life forever. After the ambulance left, Marcus stood on the sidewalk, his hands slightly shaking from the adrenaline. People from the neighborhood had gathered around, talking about what they had just witnessed. Mrs. Rodriguez, who had seen everything from her flower garden, came over and put a gentle hand on Marcus's shoulder. You did good, mijo, she said softly. Your mama would be proud. Marcus's mother. In all the excitement, he hadn't called her. He quickly pulled out his phone, noticing 3 missed calls from her already. Mr. Patel must have told someone, and word had spread fast in their tight-knit community. Before he could dial, his phone rang again. Marcus? Baby, are you okay? His mother's worried voice came through. She was still at the hospital where she worked. I'm fine, Mom, Marcus assured her. There was this man having a heart attack, and I had to help. I know, baby. They're bringing him here right now. There was a pause, and Marcus could hear the pride in his mother's voice. You remembered your training? Yes, Ma'am, everything you and the Boy Scouts taught me. Marcus felt his voice crack a little. Now that the emergency was over, the weight of what had happened hit him. Mom, I was scared, but I tried to stay calm like you always do. Listen to me, Marcus, his mother said firmly. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing what needs to be done even when you are scared. I'm leaving work early. Stay where you are. I'll come pick you up. But Marcus knew his mother couldn't afford to miss work. No, Mom, I'm okay. Really, actually, I think I want to go to the hospital. Just to make sure Mr. Bennett is all right. Mr. Bennett. His mother's voice changed slightly. Harold Bennett? Yes, that's his name. Do you know him? He's being brought to my floor right now. His mother paused again. Take the bus to the hospital, baby. I'll meet you in the waiting room. Marcus gathered his backpack, which had been forgotten on the sidewalk during the emergency. Mr. Patel came out of his store with a sandwich and a bottle of water. Here, he said, pressing them into Marcus's hands. You need to eat something, and this is for you too. He handed Marcus a bus pass. No arguments. What you did today, that was something special. The bus ride to Chicago Memorial Hospital took 20 minutes, but to Marcus, it felt much longer. He couldn't stop thinking about Mr. Bennett's face, the fear in his eyes, the way his hand had gripped Marcus's before the ambulance drove away. He hadn't even touched the sandwich Mr. Patel gave him. His stomach was too tied up in knots. When Marcus arrived at the hospital, he found the waiting room busier than usual for a Thursday evening. He recognized some nurses who worked with his mother, and they all smiled at him. One of them, Miss Jenny, who had watched him grow up during his visits to his mother at work, gave him a quick hug. Your mama raised you right, she whispered before hurrying back to her duties. Marcus sat down in one of the hard plastic chairs, his backpack between his feet. The waiting room TV was showing the evening news, but he wasn't paying attention. Instead, he watched the emergency room doors, hoping for any news about Mr. Bennett. After what seemed like hours but was probably only 30 minutes, a tall woman in an expensive-looking business suit burst through the entrance. She looked around frantically before approaching the reception desk. Marcus couldn't hear what was said, but he knew from her expression and the way she carried herself that this must be Mr. Bennett's daughter, the one Mr. Patel had called. The receptionist pointed toward Marcus, and the woman turned to look at him. Her eyes were red, like she had been crying during her drive to the hospital. She walked over to where Marcus sat, her high heels clicking against the linoleum floor. Are you Marcus? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. The young man who helped my father? Marcus stood up, suddenly feeling very conscious of his sweaty basketball practice clothes and scuffed sneakers. Yes, ma'am. Is Mr. Bennett? Is he okay? The woman, who would introduce herself as Sarah Bennett, did something unexpected. She pulled Marcus into a tight hug, and he could feel her tears soaking into his t-shirt. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for saving my father's life. Marcus didn't know what to say. He just stood there, awkwardly patting her back, realizing that this day was far from over. The hospital waiting room felt smaller as the evening wore on. Sarah Bennett sat next to Marcus, her expensive suit wrinkled from the rush drive to the hospital. She had calmed down now, wiping her eyes with a tissue while she told Marcus about her father. He's always been so careful about his health, she explained, her voice still shaky. He takes his daily walks, watches his diet. But heart problems run in our family. She turned to look at Marcus. If you hadn't been there. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I just did what anyone would do, he said quietly. No. Sarah shook her head firmly. Not everyone would have known what to do. Not everyone would have stayed calm and remembered their first aid training. You're special, young man. Before Marcus could respond, his mother appeared in her nurse's aide uniform. Lisa Thompson had been checking on Mr. Bennett between her regular duties. Sarah stood up immediately. How is my father? She asked. He's stable, Lisa answered with a gentle smile. The doctor says the quick response time made all the difference. She placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder, squeezing it gently. They're setting him up in the cardiac care unit now. Sarah let out a long breath of relief. Can I see him? In about 15 minutes, Lisa nodded. They're just finishing up some tests. While they waited, Sarah learned more about Marcus and his mother. She seemed surprised when Lisa mentioned she was a single parent, working 2 jobs to make ends meet. Marcus noticed how Sarah's eyes lingered on his worn-out shoes and the crack in his phone screen when he checked the time. "What are your plans for the future, Marcus?" Sarah asked suddenly. Marcus glanced at his mother before answering. This was a topic they often discussed at home. "I want to become a doctor," he said. "But right now, I'm focusing on basketball, hoping for a sports scholarship for college." "A doctor?" Sarah's eyes lit up with interest. "Any particular field?" "Emergency medicine," Marcus replied without hesitation. "I want to help people in crisis, like my mom does." He didn't mention that the cost of medical school made this dream seem impossible. A nurse appeared in the doorway. "Miss Bennett, you can see your father now." Sarah stood up but paused before leaving. "Would you come with me, Marcus? I know Dad would want to thank you properly." Marcus looked at his mother, who nodded encouragingly. They followed Sarah through the hospital corridors to the cardiac care unit. The beeping of machines and the squeak of rubber-soled shoes against the floor filled the air. Mr. Bennett was lying in bed, connected to various monitors. His gray suit had been replaced with a hospital gown, and some color had returned to his face. His eyes were open, and he smiled weakly when he saw them. "There's my hero," he said, his voice rough but clear. Marcus felt his face grow warm. "I'm not a hero, sir. I'm just glad I could help." Mr. Bennett raised his hand slightly, motioning Marcus to come closer. "Sarah, give me my jacket," he requested. Sarah retrieved his suit jacket from the closet, and Mr. Bennett asked her to check the inside pocket. She pulled out a small, worn leather wallet. "Open it," Mr. Bennett told Marcus. "Look at the photo." With careful hands, Marcus opened the wallet. Inside was an old photograph of a young black man in a white doctor's coat, standing proudly in front of a hospital. "That's me, 40 years ago," Mr. Bennett said. "One of the first African-American cardiologists in Chicago. It wasn't easy back then. Still isn't easy now, for many of us." Marcus stared at the photo, then at Mr. Bennett, making the connection. He had seen this picture before, in his school's Black History Month display. "You're Dr. Bennett?" Marcus's voice was filled with awe, the one who started the free clinic on the South Side. Mr. Bennett smiled wider, "The very same. And now I owe my life to a young man who wants to become a doctor himself. Sometimes God works in mysterious ways, doesn't he?" Before anyone could respond, one of the monitors started beeping more rapidly. Mr. Bennett's face showed sudden discomfort, and Lisa quickly pressed the call button for the nurse. "I think that's enough excitement for now," she said firmly. "Mr. Bennett needs his rest." As they left the room, Sarah touched Marcus's arm. "Come back tomorrow," she said. "Dad and I have something important to discuss with you." Marcus nodded, not knowing that tomorrow's conversation would completely change the course of his life. The next morning, Marcus could barely focus in his classes. His mind kept drifting back to the photo in Mr. Bennett's wallet and the promise of an important conversation. During lunch break, he sat alone in the school library, searching for information about Dr. Harold Bennett on the old computer. What he discovered made his eyes grow wide. Article after article appeared on the screen, telling the story of a remarkable man. Dr. Harold Bennett wasn't just any doctor. He was a legend in Chicago's medical community. Born in 1951 to a janitor father and a maid mother, young Harold Bennett had fought against all odds to become a doctor. He was one of only 3 black students in his medical school class of 1975. The articles showed yellowed photographs of a younger Mr. Bennett, his face determined and proud despite the challenges he faced. "You okay there, Marcus?" Ms. Williams, the school librarian, asked as she walked past. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied, not taking his eyes off the screen. "Just reading about someone amazing." The more Marcus read, the more amazed he became. Dr. Bennett had opened one of the first free health clinics in South Chicago in 1980. The clinic had served thousands of poor families who couldn't afford medical care. But that wasn't all. Dr. Bennett had also started a foundation that helped minority students become doctors. Marcus clicked on another link, this one showing the group photo from 1995. In it, Dr. Bennett stood surrounded by young black and Hispanic medical students, all wearing white coats. The caption read, "Dr. Bennett's Angels, first graduating class of Bennett Foundation scholars." The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch period, but Marcus couldn't move. His eyes were fixed on a quote from Dr. Bennett in a newspaper interview. When I was young, people told me a black kid from the South Side couldn't become a doctor. I proved them wrong. Now I want to help other young people prove them wrong too. Marcus barely paid attention in his afternoon classes. In physics, his teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, had to call his name 3 times before he responded. During basketball practice, he missed easy shots, his mind elsewhere. Thompson. Coach Williams called out, "Where's your head at today, son?" "Sorry, coach," Marcus mumbled, but even the thought of the upcoming game couldn't hold his attention. After practice, Marcus rushed home to change before heading to the hospital. His mother had the evening shift again, but she had left him a note and some money for the bus. "Proud of you, baby. Don't forget to eat dinner. Love, Mom." On the bus ride to the hospital, Marcus thought about his own dreams of becoming a doctor. He had never told anyone, not even his mother, but sometimes he would stand in front of his bedroom mirror wearing his Boy Scout first aid sash, pretending it was a doctor's white coat. But with his mother struggling to pay the bills, medical school had always seemed like an impossible dream. When Marcus arrived at the hospital, he found Sarah Bennett in the waiting room. She looked more relaxed today, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her business suit. "Dad's been asking for you," she said with a smile. "He's feeling much better today." They walked together to Mr. Bennett's room. The old doctor was sitting up in bed, looking stronger than the day before. The machine still beeped steadily, but there were fewer wires attached to him now. "There he is." Mr. Bennett's face lit up when he saw Marcus. "Sarah, show him the book." Sarah pulled out a large photo album from her bag and handed it to Marcus. Inside were more pictures of Dr. Bennett's life, his graduation from medical school, the opening of his clinic, ceremonies with his foundation scholars. Each photo told a story of breaking barriers and creating opportunities. "You know, Marcus," Mr. Bennett said softly, "when I saw you yesterday, staying so calm, knowing exactly what to do, you reminded me of myself at your age, that same look in your eyes." Marcus looked up from the album. "What look, sir?" "The look that says you want to help people. The look that says you won't let anything stand in your way." Mr. Bennett smiled. "Sarah tells me you want to become a doctor." "Yes, sir," Marcus replied. "But—" He trailed off, thinking about the cost. "But nothing," Mr. Bennett said firmly. "Sometimes life has a funny way of opening doors. Yesterday, you saved my life. Today, maybe I can help save your dream." Marcus didn't understand what Mr. Bennett meant, but something in the old doctor's voice made his heart beat faster with hope. The hospital room grew quiet as Dr. Bennett nodded to his daughter. Sarah pulled out some official-looking papers from her leather briefcase and placed them on the adjustable table across Dr. Bennett's bed. "Marcus," Sarah began, her voice gentle but serious, "did you know that my father's foundation has helped over 200 students become doctors in the past 30 years? Marcus nodded, remembering the articles he had read earlier that day. "Yes, ma'am, I read about it in the library." Dr. Bennett chuckled. "Doing your research, eh? Good. That's what a doctor should do." He shifted in his bed, sitting up straighter. "But what you probably don't know is that I've been looking for someone special for our newest scholarship program." Marcus's heart started beating faster. He gripped the edges of his chair, trying to stay calm. "You see," Dr. Bennett continued, "this year, we're starting something new. The Emergency Medicine Excellence Scholarship. It covers everything: college, medical school, even living expenses." He paused, watching Marcus's face carefully. "And I want you to be our first recipient." The room seemed to spin. Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came out. Sarah smiled at his reaction and pushed the papers forward. But why me?" Marcus finally managed to say. "You don't even know me." "Don't know you?" Dr. Bennett raised an eyebrow. "Young man, I know everything I need to know. Yesterday, you showed me who you are. You kept calm in a crisis. You remembered your training. You put someone else's life before your own comfort. Those are exactly the qualities we need in emergency medicine." Sarah stepped in, her lawyer skills showing as she explained the details. "The scholarship covers your undergraduate pre-med program at any school you choose. Then, if you maintain a 3.5 GPA, it continues through medical school. We'll also provide mentorship, summer internships, and emergency medicine training programs." Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes. He tried to blink them away, but they kept coming. I need to call my mother," he whispered. Already done, Sarah smiled. She's on her way up right now. As if on cue, Lisa Thompson appeared in the doorway, still in her nurse's ag uniform. Her eyes were red and puffy, like she'd been crying too. Mom? Marcus's voice cracked. Did you know about this? Lisa walked over and hugged her son tight. Sarah told me this morning. Baby, do you understand what this means? All those dreams you've been keeping in your heart, they can come true now. Dr. Bennett watched the mother and son embrace, his own eyes getting misty. Lisa has been taking care of me all day, he said. She told me how you study medical books from the library, how you practice first aid skills even after your Boy Scout meetings are over, how you help older people in the neighborhood with their medications. Marcus looked at his mother in surprise. She had noticed all that. Of course I noticed, Lisa said, reading his expression. I'm your mama. I see everything. Sarah pulled out another set of papers. These are the official scholarship documents. They need both your signature and your mother's. Everything has been reviewed by our foundation's board and our legal team. Marcus's hands were shaking as he looked at the papers. The numbers made his head spin. $250,000 for undergraduate studies, then another $300,000 for medical school. It was more money than he had ever imagined. There's one condition, Dr. Bennett said seriously. Marcus looked up, worried. When you become a doctor, not if, but when, you have to promise to help other young people achieve their dreams too. That's how we build a legacy. I promise, Marcus said firmly, finding his voice at last. I promise I'll make you proud. You already have, son, Dr. Bennett smiled. You already have. As Marcus and his mother signed the papers, nurses and doctors began gathering outside the room. Word had spread through the hospital about what was happening. Among them was Miss Jenny, who had known Marcus since he was a little boy visiting his mother at work. Look at God, she whispered to another nurse. That boy saved a life, and in return, his whole life got saved too. Marcus looked around the room, at his crying mother, at Sarah's proud smile, at Dr. Bennett's twinkling eyes, and knew that nothing would ever be the same again. His impossible dream had just become possible, all because he had stopped to help someone in need. The news spread through South Chicago like wildfire. By the next morning, local reporters had gathered outside Marcus's school, eager to tell the story of the young hero who saved a doctor's life and received a life-changing scholarship in return. Marcus felt strange seeing his face on the morning news. The headline read, Local Teen's Act of Kindness Leads to Medical School Dream. His phone kept buzzing with messages from classmates and neighbors. Even his basketball teammates treated him differently, like he had suddenly become someone important. You're still the same Marcus, his mother reminded him as they watched the news together over breakfast, just with bigger opportunities now. At school, Principal Harris called Marcus to her office. The walls were covered with newspaper clippings about his story. You've made our school proud, she said, smiling warmly. We're going to add your story to our Black History Month display next year, right next to Dr. Bennett's. During lunch break, younger students asked for his autograph. Marcus felt embarrassed by all the attention, but Mr. Rodriguez, his physics teacher, pulled him aside. Use this spotlight wisely, he advised. Your story can inspire others to help people and chase their dreams. The local news crew wanted to film Marcus at basketball practice. Coach Williams agreed, but first, he gathered the team. Listen up, the coach said. Marcus here proved something we always talk about. Character matters more than anything. He wasn't thinking about rewards when he helped Dr. Bennett. He just did the right thing. The reporters interviewed Marcus's teammates too. He's always been like that, said James, his best friend since 5th grade. Last month, he helped my grandma organize all her medications. That's just who Marcus is. After practice, Marcus visited Dr. Bennett again. The old doctor was getting stronger each day. His room had turned into a mini-office, with Sarah bringing foundation papers for him to review. The media attention is good, Dr. Bennett explained to Marcus. It helps us show other young people that dreams are possible. Look at these. He showed Marcus a stack of emails from Black and Hispanic students across Chicago. They all wanted to know about the Foundation's medical scholarships. Your story gives them hope, Sarah added. We've received more applications in the past 2 days than we usually get in a month. That weekend, Marcus's big basketball game finally arrived. The gym was packed. Dr. Bennett had insisted on leaving the hospital to attend, sitting in a wheelchair near the court with his daughter and personal nurse beside him. Marcus played the best game of his life, scoring 30 points and leading his team to victory. But the real surprise came after the game. Dr. Bennett called him over and handed him a package. Inside was a brand new white coat, just like the ones medical students wear. On the pocket was embroidered, "Future Dr. Marcus Thompson." A little motivation. Dr. Bennett winked. Mrs. Rodriguez organized a neighborhood celebration at her restaurant. The whole community came together. Teachers, teammates, neighbors, even Mr. Patel from the convenience store. They all brought food, making it a huge potluck dinner. During the party, Sarah announced more news. The foundation was starting a new program at Marcus's school, offering free medical training courses for interested students. They would learn basic emergency response, just like Marcus had through Boy Scouts. "This is what change looks like," Dr. Bennett said, addressing the crowd. "It starts with one person doing the right thing, then it spreads, touching more and more lives." Later that evening, Marcus found his mother sitting quietly in a corner, wiping tears from her eyes. "Happy tears," she explained when he asked if she was okay. "I always knew you were special, baby. Now the whole world knows it too." Marcus hugged his mother tight. "Everything I am is because of you, Mom." As they drove home that night, Marcus looked out at his neighborhood. Nothing had physically changed. The same streets, the same buildings, the same corner stores. But everything felt different. Where he once saw limitations, he now saw possibilities. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Channel 5 wants to do a special report tomorrow. Your story is inspiring people across the city." Marcus smiled, thinking about other kids like him, watching the news and realizing their dreams might be possible too. One simple act of kindness hadn't just changed his life. It had started a chain reaction of hope. 5 years had passed since that life-changing October day. The old convenience store where Marcus had saved Dr. Bennett's life now had a small plaque on its wall, "Where one dream saved another." Mr. Paddle kept it polished and proudly told the story to every new customer. Marcus Thompson, now a junior pre-med student at Johns Hopkins University, walked through the familiar hospital corridors of Chicago Memorial during his summer break. He wasn't visiting this time. He was doing his clinical internship, wearing the white coat that Dr. Bennett had given him years ago. The embroidered "Future Dr. Marcus Thompson" was faded now, but still visible. "Look who's here." Miss Jenny, now the head nurse, called out when she saw him. "Our boy's almost a real doctor now." Marcus smiled, remembering his first days in these halls, visiting his mother during her shifts. Lisa Thompson still worked at the hospital, but things were different now. She had been able to quit her second job at the diner, and with Marcus's scholarship covering all his expenses, she had finally been able to take some night classes. She was now a licensed practical nurse. "There's my star student." Dr. Bennett's voice boomed from his office. At 77, he had retired from medical practice but still came to the hospital 3 days a week to run the foundation. His hair was completely white now, but his eyes still sparkled with the same energy. Marcus hurried to help the older man stand, but Dr. Bennett waved him off. "I'm not that fragile anymore, son. Those cardiac rehab exercises keep me strong." Sarah Bennett, now the foundation's executive director, was there too. She had spreadsheets open on her laptop, showing the foundation's growth over the past 5 years. "Look at these numbers," she said proudly. "Since your story went public, we've sponsored 35 new medical students. 20 of them are already in medical school." Marcus looked at the photos on Dr. Bennett's office walls. Among the old pictures was a new collection, young faces full of hope, each one a recipient of the Emergency Medicine Excellence Scholarship that had started with him. "Remember what I said about legacy?" Dr. Bennett asked, pointing to the photos. "This is what it looks like." Marcus nodded, thinking about his own contribution. During summer breaks, he helped run emergency response workshops at his old high school. The program had grown so popular that other schools in Chicago had started their own versions. "Got something to show you," Dr. Bennett said, pulling out a newspaper. The headline read, "From Saved to Savior, Thompson Scholarship Winner Performs Emergency CPR." The article told the story of Keisha Williams, one of Marcus's workshop students, who had saved a man's life at a bus stop using the skills she learned. She was now pre-med at Northwestern University. The circle keeps going, Sarah smiled. Every life saved creates new opportunities to save more lives. Marcus's phone buzzed, a text from his mother reminding him about dinner. Every Sunday, they had family dinner with the Bennetts. It had become their tradition over the years. Almost forgot, Dr. Bennett said, reaching for an envelope. Your MCAT scores came in. Marcus's hands trembled as he opened the envelope. His score would determine which medical schools he could apply to. He read the numbers and broke into a huge smile. Top percentile, Dr. Bennett announced proudly, having already seen the results. Johns Hopkins Medical School won't know what hit them. Sarah was already making notes. I'll start calling the Foundation's alumni who are working in emergency medicine. We'll set up some shadowing opportunities for you next summer. As they celebrated, a group of high school students peeked through the office door. They were there for the Foundation's summer mentorship program, all hoping to follow in Marcus's footsteps. Come in, Marcus called out, recognizing the look in their eyes. The same look he'd had 5 years ago. Let me tell you a story about how dreams come true when you help others. Later that evening, at the weekly family dinner, Marcus watched Dr. Bennett tell jokes with his mother, while Sarah showed everyone pictures of her new baby, whom she had named Hope. Marcus thought about the journey that had brought them all here. One moment of crisis had created a family, launched a legacy, and showed an entire community that miracles could happen on ordinary days. What are you thinking about? His mother asked, noticing his thoughtful expression. About how helping one person can change everything, Marcus replied. And how sometimes the biggest dreams start with the smallest acts of kindness. Dr. Bennett raised his glass. To the future Dr. Thompson, he said. And to all the future doctors who will follow in his footsteps. The legacy that had started on a sidewalk outside a convenience store would continue, touching lives for generations to come.